created a monster.
You encouraged the monster.
True, yeah, I didn't create him, I just encouraged him. No, so, you ready?
Yeah, right. We're going to have a lovely story, well I assume. Yes.
From the wonderful Storyteller next door.
Thank you. I won't start with a joke, although good. I'm tempted. This is a little whimsy story, this. I don't know what possessed me to check on it this afternoon, but I did, so here you go. It's Italian, and it's in a collection by Italo Calvino, who's a fairly well-respected folklorist in the circles. And it goes something like this. There once was a king and queen who dearly wanted a child, but time passed and no child came. They consulted various wise women and physicians, and in the end the queen just gave up. She took to just wandering in the garden and talking to herself. And one day when she came in autumn to the tree that was right at the end of the garden, it was laden with apples, beautiful apples. And she turned to the king and said, why can't I have a child like an apple? Because trees can have apples. Look at all these apples. Why can't I have a child like an apple? Well, sometime later, she gave birth to an apple. It was a beautiful apple. Red, glorious red, and smooth and shining. Perfect. You could turn it this way and that way. You could find no blemish in it. The parents, the king and queen, were beside themselves. They worshipped this apple. They got a special gold plate edged with silver that the apple would sit on. And they just kept it close by. And they would talk to it. They would have their meals there with the apple close by. And it was so strange. They kept it to themselves. The servants must have known. But really, in that part of Italy, where kings and queens were fairly common, they got away with a lot. And when it came to summertime, the queen felt that the apple should get out and get some sunshine. So she would be in the habit of taking it out for an hour and putting it on the balcony in its golden plate and let the sun shine on it. And it just so happened that across the street from this king and queen's palace was another king and king's palace. And there was a young prince there, the king had long gone, with his stepmother. And he happened to spy this apple on the balcony. He couldn't believe it. He saw it being taken care of by the king. And then he fell in love with the apple, the neighbouring king. More than anything in the world, he wanted to have that apple for himself. So he went to their front gate and knocked and said, you don't know me, but I'm the king who lives across the road. And I would like the apple that you have on your balcony to be mine. And they said, oh, we can't part with it. It's like a child to us. We can't part with that apple. He said, look, we don't want to cause any trouble here, said the king. This young prince is obviously besotted. He'll get over it. Well, you can have the apple in the name of all good will and intent, as long as we can visit. Well, the prince was grateful. He bowed. And he took the apple on the gold plate and took it home, and he kept it in his room. It was a lovely apple. He watched it. He never took it out. Came down for his meals, but then went straight back up to his room. His stepmother, the old queen, was suspicious. But the prince had discovered that at a certain time of night, just before the moon rose, the apple would open up, and out of the apple would step a beautifully dressed young woman with hair like spun gold and cheeks as rosy. And she would come out, and the prince watched as he he was hiding when it first happened, he watched her go over to the basin where the water was, and she washed her face, and she got a brush, and she brushed her golden hair. Well, the prince knew that was why he had to have this apple. There was an apple princess. She was so beautiful, but the least noise, and she would suddenly flutter and run and go back into the apple, and the apple would close up over her. Well, he just got into the habit of timing it perfectly. He would wait until the moon was about to rise and go behind a screen, make sure there was a beautiful silver dish with lovely water and rose petals scattered on it, and a brush laid by. And he would watch. She came out of the apple and went forward and bathed her face, and I don't know how much more she bathed. And he just fell more and more in love with her. But he never got to actually speaking to her. He just was so afraid that he might frighten her. And one day, as it happens, and it does, war was announced, and this young prince was going to have to go off and fight. And who would look after his apple princess? He didn't trust any of the servants except his own manservant, and he said, I want you to follow my instructions. Let no one into this room. But I want you to make sure that every evening there is a silver dish of beautiful water and rose petals scattered in it, a brush there is the apple that I must take care of, and you must make sure that nothing is disturbed in the room. Keep the room locked, let no one in. And off he galloped to war. Well, the stepmother finally had a chance. She went up to the door and found it locked. She found the manservant and said, open this door. He said, no, it's more than my life is worth. The prince made me promise that no one would go in there on pain of death. Well, she wasn't going to accept that, was she? Took her a couple of days, but she got enough opium together to be able to spike a drink, give it to the manservant, and as soon as he was out for the count, she went forward, got the key out of his pocket, unlocked the door, and went in. She wanted to know what this young prince had been doing in this room all this time. She searched everywhere. Was there some woman hidden somewhere? She looked everywhere. There was nothing except this beautiful apple on a golden plate beside a silver dish with a hairbrush. She looked at the hairbrush. Long golden hairs. She looked at this apple, and I don't know if you know this, but women in those days used to have a belt, and attached to the belt would be little scissors and a little sharp knife. The old queen went forward to the apple and pricked it several times, and then was shocked to see blood start to ooze from pricks in the apple. She screamed and ran, and it was sometime later that the manservant came to, and when he went into the room, he found that there was blood all over the table and all over the dish. He was beside himself. Oh, my master, my master. And so he, luckily, had an aunt who was a fairy. So he ran to his aunt's place to get some help, and she was able to give him a potion that he was to put over the apple, because the aunt knew, the fairy, that this was a bewitched apple, and surely there was a bewitched princess inside. So when he got back and he did this, the bleeding stopped, the apple closed up. And when the prince returned, the manservant was able to say that all was well in the room, because he kept a close eye on the apple. And I don't know whether it was because the prince was so overjoyed to be reunited with this apple, but he must have said the right words. For suddenly, there in front of him, before the sun even set, this beautiful woman emerged from the apple. She said, "You're back. I've been waiting. I think I'll marry you." And he said, "Oh, that would be very nice." And so they married and lived happily ever after. The old step queen, well, when she discovered that she was found out to be so cruel, she left the kingdom and was never ever seen again. An Italian folktale. If that's not whimsical, I don't know what it is. girl.
John?
More the duck is back.
You haven't got another one, have you?
How long?
You got any jokes?
That was
Oh,
only
let me
very
tell you
short.
that joke.
That was only 10 minutes.
Look, damn it. I told this joke years ago and I'd forgotten it, and somebody said something at the folk club a couple of weeks ago and I went, oh! So, the football team at Baralabar, I used to live near there, weren't doing too well. Not scoring at all, you know. The boys got together in the pub afterwards and says, we've got to do something. We're not happy, we're not lucky. And one of the fellas says, we need a mascot. And I said, what kind of mascot? We're not dragging a dog along. And one of the chaps says, a mate of mine's got a monkey. We could have a monkey for a mascot. Well, I have to tell you, that monkey changed their lives. It was full of beans, such a lot of fun. And when it went to the matches with them, it just seemed to entertain the crowd. Everybody was happy. And they knew they were going well, and they scored really well. They had a great time. They moved right up the table. They were in the champion match. And you know, they'd take the monkey everywhere they went, and I don't know what his name was, they just called him Monkey. Anyway, on the night of the championship, it was pretty close. But I don't know whether it was the way the monkey went at the end, just before it was going to kick, put the opposition off. And the final score was the winning score. It was the Baralabar team. Well, they were ecstatic, I have to say, as it's common. They stayed in the pub way too long. And it was very late night. Next morning, though, the village was devastated. Baralabar was grieving. The police had come in the middle of the night and said, big bus crash. Terrible crash on the way here. They were all killed. There's none of them left alive, except the monkey. And so, you know, the investigation went there and they reported that, yeah, that monkey was there and they took away the bodies and there was no witnesses, nobody had been passing in a car. And one of the sergeants said, you know, this monkey's pretty smart. I'm sure if you asked her, maybe he'll tell you. So the detective says, look, monkey, were you in the bus? And the monkey goes, did you see what happened? What were the boys doing up the back? Was there anything going on? He said, like this. What about the driver? What happened with the driver? Was he around? You see, but what were you doing all this time, monkey? And the monkey goes,